there were still themes in this film that wouldn't be popular anymore today. Like, it was talking about atonement
Hey, this is Unrefined Podcast. I'm Brandon Spain, your host, with co-host Lindsay Waters. Welcome to another episode. Hey, you guys. It's us again, and we're here with this very special guest to do another episode of our Epishow. We're watching you, and we have with us the lovely Vicki Joy Anderson, and we're going to dive into the movie Flatliners. So we're really looking forward to this. I'm kind of excited about so much stuff here. So Flatliners was, I think, was it 1990? Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So it came out in 1990, and it has a very star-studded cast in it of a lot of the Brat Pack, and it has Kiefer Sutherland in it again, who we've done actually two shows with him in it. Yeah.
This is the three.
This is the third one. We don't intend to do that. It's not planned, but it kind of ends up that way. So it has Kevin Bacon, that does in every movie, and Julia Roberts and Oliver Platt and William Baldwin. We're just going to dive in, and I'm going to let Vicki get us started, and we're going to talk about the different stuff through the movie that just kind of jumps out, dealing with all the different stuff that's in it, all kinds of neat symbolism and everything. So,
yeah, this was a total shot in the dark for me, guys, when you said, like, hey, pick a movie. And I only saw this movie one time back when it came out and have very little memory even of what happened. But I just thought, well, death and near-death experiences, that's just great fodder for having, like, presuppositional analysis. So I thought there's got to be something good in there. But I had a little bit of a Mandela effect here, guys, because I have a very distinct memory of watching this movie, renting this movie on VHS, watching it with my brother. And I know in my mind the house we were in, the living room we were in, where we were. So when I looked the movie up and it said 1990, I was like, oh no, not again. In 1990, dude, I was living in a totally different house. My brother had moved away. Like, and so it must have been another movie. I don't know, but I had a little bit of an existential crisis when I found out it came out in 90. That threw me off. But
yeah, that's really crazy. I don't think I saw it in 90. I think I saw it a few years later, like in 92 or something, after it had already come out on
video. Same here. I was like 9 or 10 probably.
Yeah. Oh man.
I got it from Blockbuster.
Blockbuster. That's right.
Yep.
10 forms of ID to get your stupid 99-cent video home.
Yeah. There's actually Lindsay and I both watched. There's a documentary on Netflix. It's called The Last Blockbuster, and it's a fascinating documentary about the last blockbuster that's in the United States, and I think it's still open. It's the only one.
Wow.
Where is it? In Oregon?
Yeah, it's somewhere in Oregon. I can't remember exactly, but it's the last one.
Yeah, that's really
crazy.
Hilarious.
And,
there's this one guy in there that's a one dude in there that's a dope head, and you're like wondering why he's even in there the whole time. We don't know if he's a comedian or who he is, but he says some of the craziest things, and we're like, me and Nathan were like, why is this guy in this show anyway? So
that's amazing. Well, and do you guys remember when Blockbuster went down because of Netflix? When you guys remember when Netflix first came out, you'd get three DVDs in the mail. Yeah, and you'd have to keep like mailing them back. Like, there was no streaming. So it's crazy how much that industry has changed. But yeah. So I remember the Brat Pack. I know there's a lot of Brat Pack movies. I wasn't really into them, but I wound up seeing a lot of them because my friends wanted to see them or my brother would bring them home. But I was never, I don't know about you guys, I was never enamored with Julia Roberts or the Estevez or Kevin Bacon or even 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, like all those Molly Ring. I've to this day never seen any of them. Yeah. I was just very couldn't care less.
Yeah, I think I saw them, but I'm like you though. I wasn't very enamored with them. I think back then I was watching horror movies much to my
Yeah,
chagrin. But
I was too.
I
I was
watched a
too.
lot of them in the 2000s and really kind of, I don't know, I like the soundtrack to a lot of them.
Yeah,
well, I
had
do
good music.
now. I do now. Yeah, and that's something about this movie we can start off with. I really like the background soundtrack. It was just so nostalgic, so 80s, and it had some good music, synth stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Well, I don't want to. I don't want to jump completely off the deep end right here up front, but one of the things that I found very nostalgic about it when I watched it, it was so refreshing that there were still themes in this film that wouldn't be popular anymore today. Like, it was talking about atonement and guilt and regret and all these sort of character-based emotions. So I couldn't resist. I did not realize there was a 2017, I wouldn't even call it a remake, but it's like a quasi remake. And so I thought, well, I'm really curious if they still use the word atonement in 2017. So I did watch the remake, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. And they did carry forward somewhat the concept of forgiveness. They did not use the word atonement, but it was more of a, you've got to forgive yourself for the things that you regret. It wasn't so much making atonement with the actual people you harm. There was a little bit of that in there. I'm not going to say it wasn't in there at all, but it was interesting to see from 1990 to 2017 how the basic, like the theme of the 1990 version, I believe, was atonement. And it was still present to a small degree in the 17 version, but definitely the 17 version had more of a horror movie twist, and more of a like demonic thing, and this is going to haunt you until you forgive yourself kind of a thing. So it was a little bit different.
Yeah, I saw that, and that's when the notes I put redemption, atonement, the Catholic aspect, and reconciliation, and I mean that word is all over my notes that I took, and it really surprised me because I remember this being a horror-esque movie, and I remember, and I might have gotten it confused with what was that one with the little boy who saw dead people?
Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense. Yeah.
Sixth Sense. Yeah, I remember a scene when her dad appeared, and he was sitting in a chair or something weird. And see, it might be my Mandela effect. He was sitting in it with the hole in him, and I knew he didn't blow his brains out. And that was what was weird, which is really strange for men, which I think is significant. Men usually, I know this is really morbid, but I'm going to go here. I learned from one of my spiritual directors, who was also a policeman, said that men usually kill themselves in the head, whereas women will shoot themselves in the trunk area. And the reason is they don't want to have their head blown off for a funeral. It's really bizarre, but he said it's very stereotypical, but it's he says, wow. 9 out of 10 times that's how it is. So I thought that was really interesting that he had killed himself by shooting himself through the heart, which is interesting. Anyway, I don't know if that means anything, but I remembered a scene where he was like really creepy looking, like one of the dead people in the Sixth Sense, and it didn't show up. I just remember it more of a horror movie. So when the redemption showed up at the end, which we'll get to, I guess, it really surprised me a lot.
Yeah, I certainly was not expecting any sort of moralistic theme to run through it. I thought it was just going to all be like the glory of science. So I was actually pleasantly surprised, but I think movies were allowed to get away with that content back in the 90s more so than today. Now people will think that you're preaching at them, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, if
go ahead.
If we can just kind of rewind all the way back to the very beginning, but I don't know anything about art, you guys. I'm like not an artsy person. You get me in an art museum and I'm just like, it all just looks like paint on the wall. I have no brain for that, but
I love art.
But because there was so much of it in the opening credits, I thought this stuff's got to mean something. So I did do a little bit of research, and that sculpture that they show at the very beginning is in Chicago. It's called the Fountain of Time, and it's 100 mortals passing before Father Time. And then they show Hermes, and Hermes is shown throughout the whole thing. Yep, the head of Hermes. And so he is the protector of travelers, and he is also the one that can travel between the worlds, meaning Hades, the Hades and the living. So obviously very symbolic, intentional symbolism there.
Yeah, I've kind of always fixate on one thing when we do these. And Hermes, the Hermes head was the one that got me, because I was thinking, what does Hermes have to do with this? He was the messenger of the gods. I knew that. He had the winged helmet. And I didn't realize he had that kind of, what's the term, psychopomp role of guiding the dead. So that made perfect sense. Yeah. And the more I read about him, the more he reminded me of someone else I fixated on for the Crossroads when we did. And Legba has a lot of the same. The West African sort of trickster figure has a lot of the same stuff. He's a messenger of the Yoruba and the Fawn gods. He's he's got that same kind of psychopomp role sometimes, and he's a guardian of boundaries, gates, roads, things like that. Liminal, which always has to do with death. So the Hermes thing really, the Hermes thing really jumped out at me there.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, Vicki. Did the Father Time, is that Kronos? That's
what I was thinking.
Is that, I mean, like Saturn?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Saturn, which, if you've read Derek Gilbert's book, we all know who Saturn is too. So
yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting too, since the opening shot is this depiction in sculpture of Saturn, because one thing I had written down, and I wasn't going to say anything about it because I thought, well, maybe it's not significant. But then I realized that it was carried over into the 2017 version as well. There's a lot of scenes, especially in the opening, where the architecture has X's. And so there's a lot of wrought iron fencing and grating and buildings, and there's all these X's. And we know that X is the symbol of Saturn. And so I thought, well, it's probably just the architecture it's there. But I noticed then, even though the scenery in the 2017 version was completely different and they were in different locations, that symbol of the X in all of the architecture was predominant in the 2017 version as well. So it makes me wonder if that was intentional.
Yeah, it probably was. Well, the 2017 version, where was it? Was it still supposed to be Loyola in Chicago and just shot different, or is it a different place in the movie?
I'm not 100% sure, but I didn't get the sense that it was Chicago. I thought, but it could have been. I don't know. I'm just kind of seeing how quickly I can look that up.
Yeah, there's some sort of significance in Chicago. I don't know why it was Chicago versus it could have been anywhere else. And of all the medical schools, why is it Loyola, a Catholic university? I mean, I know they have a good medical school. I looked that up, but it's not Harvard, or Yale or one of the best schools. Why was Loyola chosen? In my opinion, without going too deep yet, is it has to do with the Catholic overtones throughout the whole movie. Particularly, I remember the character Rachel. I mean, there was Jesus, and it was in her house. There was pictures of saints, and seems like there was a cross on the wall. Maybe it was a crucifix, I think. And so you could definitely tell that she was raised Catholic, and she was the one that had the primary interest that believed that there's something in the beyond. She was, which is interesting, Vicki, because we interviewed a hospice nurse who has a lot of stories about near-death experiences, and that's what I kind of saw Rachel. Even though she was training to be a doctor, she was more looks like in the hospice area a lot.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. What I thought was really fascinating is she was kind of the Catholic, the religious character. And then Kevin Bacon was the atheist, right? So you had this contrast. Okay. But when you look at the way their storylines unfolded after they had both flatlined, the Julia Roberts character, the second she wakes up from it and she goes into the bathroom to kind of recover, we see the Nietzsche quote, "God is dead." And you see her then blatantly struggling with her faith. And death is not anything like it's not this wonderful, beautiful place. So she struggles with the faith. But it's the atheist character who stumbles upon atonement as being the way out of this. And so I thought that was interesting, the way they threw the stereotypes of religious and a-religious people on their head, that, you think that the religious person has this stuff all figured out, and they're the ones that are going to have the wherewith to understand and interpret these experiences. Whereas it became a crisis of faith for her, whereas it gave faith to the atheist who understood that atonement was the way out of the predicament that they had dug themselves into.
Which is really interesting, because it in my opinion, that reminds me of the kingdom being a kingdom of contrasts. I call it a lot of times with when I've discipled different people that like kingdom contradictions. You have to go low to go high. You have to be poor to be rich. You have to be, all the different contrasts of the kingdom of God. And so I kind of see that there. The atheist, like you said, the a-religious actually becomes the one that he actually redeems the rest of them, because he's the one that shares the quote gospel, unquote.
Yeah.
So the good news of forgiveness. So anyway.
Yeah, I really like that. I don't know. There might be Christians out there that are offended by that, who might make it look like they're making religious people out to look ignorant and the atheists to look enlightened. But I actually really liked it, because I liked the fact that at any point, the Holy Spirit, as we would call it, at any point, it doesn't matter where you are, or how long you went to church, or what you know or don't know about the Bible. At any point, you can have that aha moment, and you can realize that it all the answer to everything is atonement, not necessarily forgiving yourself or others only, but the forgiveness that we need from the Messiah. So I love the fact that came through someone who wasn't overly churched and had all the answers.
Hey, all you awesome Unrefined fans out there, if you'd like to hear the rest of this awesome episode, then join our community by becoming a member at unrefinedpodcast.com. Thanks, guys.